Let's continue the conversation around the build-up to the Finance Minister's medium-term budget policy speech, and we're joined now by the Federation of Unions of South Africa, that's Riefdah Ajam, who is the Secretary General of this federation. Let's start with your expectations out of this medium-term budget policy statement. Good morning.
Morning to you and good morning to your listeners. There's most certainly a shopping bag full of expectations that we have on the back of the fact that Minister Godongwana needs to look at this budget in the context of it being pro-poor. The working class have been suffering extensively as a result of not only austerity measures that have been put in place previously, government trying to rein in spending, which has not yielded the desired results. So ultimately, from our side, number one no-go area is for Minister to alleviate the pressure and to even dispel any notion of any form of cuts. We are in no way demonstrating our capabilities of being a capable state by spending on essential service delivery elements such as education, such as health, such as policing, and many of those other areas. That's the first area. The second area we are saying is that the minister should in no way be increasing the taxes in any such way. Needless to say that, in essence, we should be looking at the scrapping of that on essential items to assist the poor with the way of moving forward. There are numerous other areas, and we are in essence calling for an expansion of the public service, which is directly linked to South Africa's capability of being a capable and a competent state, and where the President and the Minister needs to be looking at are those structural reforms to be getting South Africa working. The basic income grant is something that we have equally been pondering on, and we really want Minister Godongwana to give some decisive indication to South Africans this afternoon that the 350 grant will be translated into a basic income grant. There should naturally be a progression in this regard, considering the pressure on the finances, but ultimately when we take a look at what the Peter Maritzburg Economic Justice Coalition has spoken to, we are most certainly in favour of advancing that to give assistance and alleviation to many of South Africans who have been subjected to the worst form of atrocities, not just COVID-19, but jumping from one crisis to the next. So there's most certainly a whole list of elements, but we are zooming in on the critical elements that government has the capability to make credible solutions towards where it is that we want to go to, and that is growth. But it must certainly be growth that is accompanied by jobs so that we minimize the impact of all the grants that are being dispersed.
We're going to talk about growth in a few, but let me present to you what has been presented by those who know the finances well, the counter-argument, because what you have advocated for now is social spending, and that is what some of the economic observers are saying has driven the debt to GDP ratio to where it sits right now, and the understanding is that that sits just above 70%, and that is not a good place for our fiscal position to be. Add to that what you are also advocating for, which is the expansion of the public service. The question is going to be, where is the money going to come from? Because the tax base is also not expanding. Instead, it's doing the inverse.
You are 100% correct, and to a degree we want to agree with many of the commentators. However, the point that we are all missing here, number one, is the fact that South Africa is a developmental state, is a developing state. We are in no way a developed nation, and from that particular perspective, we need to ensure that we can increase spending, and by unlocking the potential in that way, by ensuring ensuring that we do justice to the working class citizens and the poorest of the poor, we will be able to demonstrate our capabilities. We should not be using crises as the easiest scapegoat to cut on service delivery each time. We have seen government applying that tactic, and it has in no way been beneficial, because ultimately what government should be focusing on is cutting on unnecessary spending, because at the end of the day, we all know what has become of that scenario, that government has appointed a cabinet that is expansive by nature, and in many instances they have not been equal to the task. They have not been performing in the way that we require, and ultimately when we take a look at the issues that those commentators are focusing on, we need to understand the historical perspective of that debt. It just didn't happen automatically, and it didn't come overnight. So debt servicing costs is most certainly an issue that we are focusing on, but we need to be able to apply a focused approach. We need to look at implementing the policies that have already been in place. We need not recreate new policies, but in essence focus on the implementation, because the National Development Plan most certainly speaks about credible solutions that can take us forward. So we should not be sidetracked by issues that could hamper our ability, because we most certainly have the capability and the competence. All we need is the political will to drive this forward. So cut on the necessary items and redirect, but where you are going to be doing so, let's have an inclusive conversation about these that contribute towards nation building.
You talk about a cut where it is necessary and redirect. I want us for a moment to listen to President Ramaphosa, because he does seem to be talking the same language as you, but the question will come a little thereafter. Let's take a listen to what the President had to say.
We therefore remain absolutely committed to stabilizing our levels of debt, and adopting a responsible fiscal policy. A Minister of Finance will set out government's plans to achieve this trajectory in the medium-term budget policy statement on Wednesday. Spending on health, education, policing, and other essential services will be protected as far as possible. As we move to target spending on programs that are working for the poor, we need to acknowledge that our social grants, including the SRD grant, as well as our public employment programs, are vital in supporting those who are vulnerable.
Riefdah, that was the President addressing on Monday night. But what is not being said is the promise to cut down on government departments. And I don't know how perhaps you can juxtapose the cutting down of cabinet, if you like, versus what you are advocating for, which is to increase the public service. You've got to explain to us how this can be achieved with the pedestrian economic growth that we have observed over the years.
Okay, let us be clear on the elements. We know very well what happened during the Zuma era, when there were deployments made, and the bloatedness that resided was in actual fact right on the top. That's the point we need to start off with. What we need to understand at the end of the day is that we have been calling for government to do a complete audit of the public service. That has still not happened. So the implementation of that 5-year-old plan to review, number one, the configuration, number two, the number, and number three, the size of national government must be undertaken with absolute immediate effect. We are also calling for proper fiscal management to be monitored, especially at provincial government level. And if we come to local government level, it's a bleak picture that is being painted here now. The Auditor General has unveiled in that annual report the dismal state of the dysfunctional municipalities. That is where we need to get it correct. If we take a snapshot look at what that the healthiness of our municipalities look like, it's absolutely shameful. The fact of the matter is that over 40% of those municipalities have not been given a clean bill of health. What are we doing about that in particular? And what FEDUSA is reiterating is the fact that, number one, there's an absolute over-reliance on consultants. Why do we then demonstrate our incapability of being able to deal with financial management at such crucial levels? Why do we appoint CFOs when they are not equal to the task? So many of those elements needs to be rectified and remedied with absolute urgency to bring about stability in that particular tier of government so that we can move forward and we can demonstrate to the external world that we are capable, we are competent, and that the downgrading of our municipalities and our SOEs will be something of the past. These are many of the aspects that we can do. So in response to our narrative and our position that there should be an expansion of the public service is to, number one, go to those areas that have just been unpacked now, because most certainly we have demonstrated our capability in those areas of government. It is at the top where the bloatedness is residing. It is at the top where your CFOs are not performing, and where they are not performing, they should be removed. And the amendment to the legislation should be done as a point of absolute urgency. We cannot continue to condone improper behavior when our country is bleeding. And for now, let us move the country forward. Let's government implement the issues that we have been calling for. Let's work together, because most certainly we want to demonstrate without contradiction that we are a capable state. And at the realm of that is the ability of our public servants to be able to step up their game. Let's stop focusing on the bloatedness that is at the top when we have been calling for those audits to take place, and unfortunately they have not been done. So government needs to shape up, and at the same time they need to have the political will to address these matters and stop using public servants as the easy route out, as the scapegoat when we are dealing with crises. They know exactly where the crises are centered at.
Riefdah Ajam is the General Secretary of FEDUSA. Thank you very much for your time and indeed inputs ahead of the medium-term budget policy statement that is expected to be delivered by the Minister of Finance later this afternoon.